Why Taco Bell failed in the country of tacos. Imagine trying to sell ice to the Arctic. Sounds ridiculous, right? But that's roughly the metaphor one cultural critic used to describe one of the most ambitious, yet ultimately most pointless expansion attempts in fast food history. Taco Bell trying to sell tacos to Mexico, the very country that invented tacos in the first place. What's even more interesting is that Taco Bell didn't just fail once in Mexico. They tried twice, more than a decade apart, and both attempts ended in complete failure. In this video, we're tracing both of Taco Bell's attempts to break into the Mexican market, how they failed in almost the exact same way both times, despite having years in between to learn from their first mistake. This journey began in 1992 when Taco Bell tried Living Más, their signature slogan, in Mexico for the very first time. But this wasn't a full restaurant launch. They started with something far more modest, a small food cart, about 9 feet in size, built inside a KFC location in Mexico City. Why inside a KFC? Because at the time, both chains, Taco Bell and KFC, were owned by PepsiCo. This was a fairly sensible way to test the market with minimal risk and investment, leveraging existing infrastructure from their own sister brand. This cart served familiar American menu items already known to Taco Bell customers in the United States, nachos and burritos, alongside Pepsi products. After this initial test, the chain later expanded into a handful of standalone outposts standing next to KFC locations across various cities in Mexico. A cultural critic later delivered a comment that was both sharp and right on target about this entire effort. They described it like bringing ice to the Arctic. This is an extremely effective metaphor for explaining Taco Bell's core problem in Mexico. Mexicans simply didn't see the point of a fast food version of a dish their own country had already perfected over generations. Tacos aren't just food to Mexicans, they're part of their national culinary identity, with traditions, techniques, and regional variations that developed long before the modern fast food concept even existed. Offering an instant and standardized version of something already so deeply valued and understood by local culture is essentially offering something the target market has no need for at all. If the cultural problem alone wasn't heavy enough, Taco Bell also faced an extremely significant pricing problem. In the 1990s, a meal at Taco Bell cost around $3.25. Meanwhile, local street vendors offered the same dish, arguably even more authentic, for roughly half that price. Picture Taco Bell's position in the eyes of Mexican consumers. They were offering a product considered less authentic than the local version, at a price that was actually twice as expensive. This completely undercut the value proposition that should have been Taco Bell's main appeal. There was no rational reason for Mexican consumers to choose Taco Bell over the street vendors they already trusted, who offered a cheaper and more authentic product. Facing consumer confusion over the unfamiliar hard-shell taco format, remember, traditional Mexican tacos typically use soft tortillas, not the hard shells common in America. Taco Bell tried rebranding. They created a new term, tacostada, a blend of taco and tostada, another Mexican dish that uses a crispy fried tortilla. This looked like a fairly creative attempt to bridge their product with terminology more familiar to local consumers. But this name change didn't help at all. The core problem wasn't about product naming. It was about the entire value proposition that had already failed from the start. Uncompetitive pricing and a product seen as irrelevant by consumers who already held extremely high standards for what a real taco should be. By 1994, just 2 years after the initial launch, every Taco Bell location in Mexico had officially shut down. By 2007, having grown into a global brand with 230 stores outside the United States, Taco Bell decided to try its luck in Mexico once again. This time, they opened a location next to a Dairy Queen inside a shopping mall, just outside Monterrey, a location deliberately chosen closer to the U.S. border, compared to their first location in Mexico City. This choice of location suggests Taco Bell had apparently learned something from their first failure. They chose to position themselves closer to a region culturally more exposed to American influence. But as we'll see, the lesson they took away turned out not to be deep enough to genuinely address the same underlying root problem. Taco Bell's public relations director, Rob Poech, was explicit that the chain wasn't trying to be authentic Mexican food. Instead, they positioned themselves as American Tex-Mex, built around the concept of value and convenience. They even renamed several menu items and added Doritos-based dishes and French fries to further reinforce their American identity, rather than trying to match or compete with local culinary authenticity. This sounds like a more honest, clearer strategy compared to their first attempt, not pretending to be something they weren't. But unfortunately, this honesty about brand identity turned out not to solve the fundamental problem Taco Bell was actually facing in this market. Mexican customers actually found this shift in direction even more off-putting than their first attempt. One shopper delivered a fairly sharp comment to a reporter, stating that something was lacking in this experience, and questioning why their food had to be served alongside American-style French fries. This simple comment actually summed up quite precisely the huge disconnect between what Taco Bell was selling and what Mexican diners actually wanted. Ironically, by being more honest about their American identity and moving away from claims of authenticity, Taco Bell only further underscored why their product was irrelevant to this market. Mexican consumers weren't looking for an American Tex-Mex experience. They already had their own version of tacos, already perfected, and had no need for an American alternative to it. Some observers also pointed to timing as a possible additional factor. This 2007 relaunch coincided with an increasingly tough political climate around U.S. immigration enforcement against Mexican citizens. This may have colored how local consumers received the return of an American brand to their market at that particular time. This broader political and social context may have added an extra layer of difficulty for Taco Bell, on top of the fundamental product and pricing problems they'd already faced since their first attempt. These new stores then closed in swift succession over a fairly short period. By 2010, Taco Bell had shut down every one of its Mexican locations for the second time. And since then, the company has chosen to stay out of this market entirely. 2 attempts, 2 failures, with more than a decade in between to learn and adjust their strategy. And the result stayed exactly the same. Today, the idea of a Taco Bell in Mexico has become something of a running joke. A satirical Facebook page for a fictional Taco Bell location in Mexico City even carries a 1-star rating, with one comment summing up the sentiment quite bluntly, calling their products not tacos, but trash. That's a fairly fitting epitaph for a chain that tried to sell tacos to the very country that invented them. So what's the big lesson we can take from Taco Bell's double failure in Mexico? What makes this story so interesting to analyze is that Taco Bell got 2 separate chances, more than a decade apart, to fix their mistakes. But on both occasions, they essentially failed in almost the same way, offering an American version of a dish already deeply perfected by its home culture, at a price uncompetitive against a more authentic and cheaper local alternative. This is an extremely important reminder. Some markets aren't just hard to enter. Some markets fundamentally don't need the product you're trying to sell, no matter how much you adjust your marketing strategy or brand positioning. When a culture already has an authentic, perfected version of a product, trying to sell a standardized, instant version of that same product to that culture is often a battle that's nearly impossible to win, no matter what strategy is used. Sometimes, the biggest lesson in business isn't about how to adapt better to a market, but about recognizing when a market fundamentally isn't a fit for what you're offering at all. If you enjoy global business case studies like this, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss other case studies on global business successes and failures. See you in the next video.